So, question to both of you, really. I like to think that we're not just doing co-production, we're doing co-production right. And we're challenging ourselves at every point to make sure that we are not just going through the motion. Have you got examples of where you've got great buy-in, but when push comes to shove, when time gets tight, when costs get tight, it's just crumbled? Is that, or is it such an intuitive process, as I believe, that once you've got it embedded, once you commit to it, it actually takes on a life of its own?
Yeah, great question. I think the whole process of co-production is a learning one. So you never go in, as you know, you never go into it thinking, well, this is what co-production is and this is the outcome we're going to have from it. And I think in a few examples I can think of, it's gone from a very wide scale scope of we can co-produce a lot. And then as time has gone by and resources have dwindled and the appetite for co-production has got a scope to it. And so by being able to define what you're doing by saying we are doing co-production truly, sometimes that scope has had to get smaller. So a service might have had to co-produce a smaller part and then maybe do consultation, engagement and other kinds of involvement for other parts of the wider project. But in those sort of examples, we think it's absolutely fine to just be honest and say co-production is kind of a dream that we have and we're learning about it all the time during this project. But for this particular case, we might just have to focus and have people with relevant lived experience who have some really valuable experience to give for a part of it. And then it can grow from there if it can.
It's really interesting because we've gone through similar experiences, not to the extent that we are constraining the scope that significantly, but I think the learning aspect for me was it's okay to set the parameters we discussed, and whether that's narrowing the scope or whether it is adding a degree of practicality or just the train tracks upon which you're going to put the train of co-production. But don't be scared about that, because for me it's about sticking with the process and observing that simple principle that it doesn't stop. It's not an exercise, because even if you just get right at the end of the program, you can be picking the colour of the carpet. It's still valuable because more people that have input into that are going to feel more vested in the outcome and will have a better view of the product, the building, that whatever it is that you've produced. So it's interesting that people do come under challenge, but what I would say is it's okay. You don't have to keep it completely pure at the expense of the outcome. It's all right to be a little bit practical.
And people understand that and actually grow in trust and confidence of the process.
As long as you keep that communication going and you're still in co-production with these people whilst that's happening.
Yeah.
You haven't gone away, made that decision and then come back and said it. It's all
that's a really key
being
point.
Communicated at the same time.
Involve everybody in that decision and you've got a far better chance of it being accepted as opposed to people
understood.
feeling that it's been done to them. And once again, that's a return to the old method, and that you'll start to build resentment, you'll start to build the barriers of trust.
You were saying about ongoing co-production. I imagine with the hospital, once it's all built and ready, the co-production will continue, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
As it develops.
And you'll still have those hundreds of people, won't you?
Yeah, so why wouldn't you want to use those? Continue to use those people? Now, it's quite interesting where we've. I think in the past, my experience, not necessarily with the hospital, but you sometimes accept some pretty appalling levels of input because that's the way traditional methods have usually worked. So if you go out for consultation and you get a 5% response, you satisfy yourself, hey, that's all right. 5%, well, yeah, most people only get 5 to 7%. That's okay. It's not okay. How can you be satisfied with a 5% response?
That's really interesting.
Whereas if you really embrace co-production, you can go at it again and again and again, and 5% can become 10%, become 20%, become 25%. And next time you ask, it will be naturally 25%.
Yeah.
So don't accept that the traditional methods of engagement, the traditional methods of consultation, which get appalling response rates. Let's be honest, they do. This is a different way, and it can be revisited and revisited and revisited. And the more times you do it, the more open you are to it, the more effective it will be. And then you won't have to accept those poor responses. We recently did some face-to-face events, some post-COVID face-to-face events, and the footfall, pretty small. Now the planners that we're working with are saying, no, it's brilliant. We don't normally get that many. I'm like, really? And I didn't think it was that great. And then we started to get some of the feedback coming in. We had over 700 completed feedback forms. 700, that's a mess. And they were saying, we don't normally get anything like that.
That's a testament to the process.
And it wasn't just the angry people, of which there are always a minority, who will always respond, or the massively positive people that will always feel that they have to respond. They're the outliers. But we got a big clot of people in the middle that were just happy to give their thoughts. That's pretty powerful. And it's led us to a point where we now understand what the key concern is. So you might think you know what the key concern is. We did it all as like a word diagram, and the words that stood out massively were parking, highways and access. Now, if you're designing a hospital, you might think it's all about scanners and this pathway and that pathway.
It's those wider things that impact our health and our well-being
and the experience of using the service. If you can't get there, or you can't park when you get there, or you're paying a fortune for parking, that's going to really impact that whole experience, that whole user experience, and in some cases it can be a detriment to health. You think you turn up in a rush, you turn up in a paddy, you can't get parked,
and that could affect the clinical care that you're
absolutely
receiving.
Right.
Especially if you've got to go in and have your blood pressure done.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's through the roof. But that for me is another example of how stepping beyond. We didn't have to engage people. We could have just said, no, we know best. Of course we do. We'll just make a bigger car park. And we'd have accepted that on the basis of 5 people responding, or the 10 angry people that are saying that have really got a bone to make with you. But so and the more you do it, we're just about to go out on our second round of co-production, or a second round of face-to-face sessions with the public. And it'd be great to see how we get on this time, because now we've got to go back and say we've listened, we've heard what you've had to say, and here are our plans for addressing it.
And we'll do it together.
We haven't come up with those plans. We know parking, that's the broker. No, we'll ask as many people as we can, and we'll work with our co-production teams and our community engagement teams to drive that solution.
When Sue and I are delivering our workshops and we're talking to people about co-production, we talk about how do you bring in those people that are not the loudest people and they're not the most well-informed people, the quieter voices.
That's a real
the
key
people
point.
that don't usually come to your service, that don't know about your service or don't realise it's for them. How have you found a way to reach those people? Yeah,
it's a really, really key point, because if you think co-production, and we set up, as I said, these 13 teams. Within those 13 teams, there are going to be some really powerful, highly educated, deeply experienced consultants, chief nurses, really the sort of people that you'd actually question if you were just a user, whether or not, dare I speak up? So having them people in a meeting and all around one table, it's going to be intimidating. You're going to get the experienced people that are comfortable with the environment and that speak for a living almost, hogging the environment, and you're not going to get the richness of conversation. You can try and facilitate that and bring those people in, but even then they may not feel comfortable in that environment to speak up. So we've done 2 things that I'm really quite proud of. One is the extent to which we've engaged the voices that rarely get heard. So the effort we've done to identify means of engaging, for example, the travelling community, are those people that find themselves incarcerated, huge users of the service, very legitimate viewpoints. But how are you going to get them involved? It's not easy. You've got to go that extra mile to actually give them an environment, and you can't invite them to a meeting. So you just find different means. We engage with the traveller community through the boxing club. We met
wow.
somebody there that wanted to get involved and has a number of people from the travelling community at the boxing club, and was willing to take the questions to them and ask them that way, in their time, in their space. The community engagement group doesn't necessarily throw everyone together and mix everybody up and expect them all to speak up. It respects the fact that they may have different ways in which they prefer to communicate. So it's okay to ask them on a Zoom call. It's okay to ask them in a meeting room, a smaller focus group. It's okay to meet them in a separate focus group, as long as you engage them, as long as you give them the chance to speak, and as long as you listen.
Or in a cafe over a cup of tea.
Precisely that. You know, I would never speak up in a meeting. It's not my normal style.
Really?
Yeah. I'd struggle. I'm easily intimidated.